Thank you so much and good morning. What an honor to be here this morning. I believe the past 2 days have been very, very informative, very action-packed in terms of what needs to be done, because the work ahead is cut out for all of us. It is really an honor to be talking to you this morning, and I want to thank the Tourism Business Council of South Africa for putting this together, because at the end of the day, when we leave, I know people are tired of speeches, believe me. They want speeches that have action. And when we leave, we must have an action plan in terms of what to do, where to from here. Because often we come and gather and talk and talk and talk, and then we gather again next year and talk. And the action plan that Tourism Business Council of South Africa have put together, it's something that needs to be commended, because it is exactly what South Africa needs. As our awesome program director said, small businesses are the engine of our economy. This is said often, and it's mentioned often. However, small businesses are not operating in isolation. Actually, without tourism, our small businesses will suffocate. Because if you look at our township and rural economies, if you look at our informal traders, they thrive on tourist destinations, which means that there's a need to link this and make sure that they don't only exist, but they thrive. In this seventh administration, we've prioritized the regulatory reforms, what we call red tape, because most of the time, it is us as government that comes up with laws and acts and bills that actually stand in the way of the growth of small businesses. We've got one of the highest failure rates of startups, and we needed to investigate why. Why is it that people start businesses but they don't succeed in a few years down the line? That business doesn't exist anymore. Because if we don't interrogate that from our side as government, we will keep on working almost backwards. As a department, we did a very useful exercise in this seventh administration, and we've identified 28 pieces of legislation that from our side as government either needs to be changed, repealed, amended, because it is not helping in terms of the growth of small businesses. It's actually standing in their way. We call it the impediments that we've identified. And that was identified by ourselves, as we've already started with the work of making sure that we streamline that to power the small business so that they can create the jobs that we keep talking about. Everywhere where we climb stages, from the president to everyone, we are saying by 2030, we're going to create 11 million jobs, and 9 million of the 11 million will come from small businesses. But small businesses will not be able to create those jobs if we as government are strangling them in terms of the environment that they operate in terms of the administrative burdens that they find themselves having to go around, in terms of the things that we've created, sometimes with the aim of helping, but at the moment it has showed us that it hasn't worked. It requires us to put more work in terms of changing that. Just this week, Cabinet approved our National Entrepreneurship Strategy, which is going to make it compulsory from a basic education that entrepreneurship is part of the curriculum. And these are the things that came from South Africans, things that we've been saying, things that, we have to listen. And I'm really, really pleased that we are this far, because if we don't start them young, we also risk the failure rate growing, because at the end of the day, when people can't find work, even if they didn't have interest in entrepreneurship, they might enter the ecosystem simply because they can't find work. But we know that is the most difficult route that you could ever take. Doesn't mean that it's easy to be an entrepreneur. You know, it is not just something that you just take an unemployed or people that can't find work and say, here is an opportunity, please start your own businesses. Those people don't sleep. Anyone who is running their own business will tell you that every day it's game day. And it's not everyone that want to walk into that environment, and hence we have to streamline our regulations, we have to streamline our laws to accommodate that. We talk a lot about the informal sector, which contributes about 34% to our GDP. Hence, it is the most over-regulated environment in South Africa. We are treating small businesses like big firms. We pin them down to UIF compliance. They must hire consultants to do that for them. If we don't relieve them of these things, we are going to continue to talk, and we will not be able to grow that ecosystem. We will not be able to actually ignite the spirit of entrepreneurship that we are talking about. We will not be able to create the jobs that we keep saying we will create. And those that are excluded will continue to be excluded simply because we as government are standing on the way. And that is why it is extremely important to acknowledge. They say, once you acknowledge that you are an alcoholic, it's easier to deal with your problem. So when you acknowledge, yes, when you acknowledge that here, it's us, government, that hasn't been doing our job in terms of making sure that, more and more people are entering the space. It is easy to do business. It is, we are making it in a way that it is not a punishment. I always say, we mustn't punish small business. It's not a punishment that you want to contribute to this economy. When we, last year we had our national enterprise bill, which also facilitated the issue of having the Office of the Small Business Ombuds for the first time, that we are at the final stage of actually appointing the Small Business Ombuds. What does that mean? A lot of small businesses on the ground will tell you that I've done work at the municipality, I've done work with the provincial government, but they haven't paid me, and I have to shut down, or I have to let go of my employees, or all the other challenges that they meet. Small businesses are unable legally, they don't have the legal muscle to take government to court. Hence, they need that representation. They need that independent office to say, bring it here and we will look at it. And this is critical because most of them didn't shut down because the environment was not conducive, or it was because of us, our government departments. That is why the regulations that we've come up with now, it also gives us the authority to say to a local government, why haven't you issued a business license here? Because local governments have got their own, what they call bylaws, which is the laws that govern them. And you can't touch them when it comes to that. They will tell you the bylaw doesn't allow us to do that. So by passing the business licensing bill, which you also saw it going for public comments, and it is now a bill, it says now, we've got the authority to say, if this municipality is charging 5,000 rand for a license to operate, and that one is charging 100 rand, and that one is charging 500 rand, and that one is issuing the license to operate for free, what does that mean for small businesses? And we needed to standardize it across the country, that we can also hold a municipality accountable. Within 30 days, why haven't they issued that license? Within 30 days, why hasn't that small business been paid? Why hasn't that supplier been paid within 30 days? And this, again, came from the ground. It came from businesses. It came from South Africans to say, yes, you've got this, but at local government it's not working. Because local governments are sort of independent, the provincial governments are independent, and that is why now the task of making it one government is really something that we don't have a choice but to operate in that way. The operating in silos has killed not only small businesses but many industries, because the left doesn't know what the right is doing, and we ended up with situations like we can't control. Like, some municipalities take like 2 years to issue a license for someone to trade. Where is that business at that time? Where should that business go at that time? What are they doing for that 2 years? So it's almost as if like we strangled them before they could even start. And these are some of the things that we've really put into action that are going to make sure that we power this ecosystem to create the jobs that it needs to create. Of course, tourism is one of our largest industries in South Africa. It employs millions across the value chain. And tourism also has got the labor intensive nature and direct linkages to local economies. When they link to those local economies, they present a critical opportunity to stimulate small business growth, especially in townships, rural areas, and informal sectors. Many of you, when you travel, there is no way that you don't see informal traders across the road, across the places that we are going. And those are the people that we always say, please support them. When you look at everything, like from our bidding, from our a lot of activity going on that in our national entrepreneurship strategy, we are actually we are talking about incentivizing these businesses so that they remain in business. One of the critical factors is the issue of sustainability. You don't want small business to only access finance, but you want them to access finance and also be sustainable. And sustainability doesn't only mean financially. It means that that business needs to sustain itself. It needs to exist for you. Actually, when you start your own business, in a way you are starting a legacy, because most of the time, or majority of the time, you would have started something for your family, the families that are coming, including cooperatives that are starting to pick up as well in our country. That we build that ecosystem in a way that we're building legacies, not only businesses, and we are going to realize that, the potential that we hold with small businesses, it's our only way out. And I want to say to all of us sitting here that it is our only way out, because if the economy is not growing, if it continues to be stagnant where we are all in trouble. We all know that. All of us are not going to be able to thrive anyway. Doesn't matter where you are, if our economy is regressing or it's stagnant. So us supporting small businesses and making sure that they succeed is not only something that by the way it needs to be done. It is actually for our own survival. It's for the survival of this country. It is for the survival of generations to come. And these small businesses that are carrying us, they need a laser focus so that we are able to survive ourselves as a country, as people, and we are able to build the inclusive economy that is growing as we keep talking about that. This is solely in the hands of small businesses. And when small businesses must create these 9 million jobs by 2030, you can understand the amount of work that is in front of us. And our role is to create an environment where this can happen. When that environment allows for small businesses to actually thrive, we are going to be able then to talk about something that we can point at and say, this is where we are, and this is what we are doing, and these are the results. South Africans are going to judge anybody by the results. I think we've come from an era where we celebrated announcements and we never followed up. And I mean, all of us sitting here, if I come here and I say I'm announcing 500 million for something, you celebrate that, but you never follow up in terms of, did that happen? And I think South Africans have moved then to a stage now where they are saying, no, now we are holding you accountable for results. We are no longer going to listen to your announcements that you make and announce big monies, but we don't see anything. And I think this is really a critical psychological move from our residents and from South Africans that are saying, where are the results? Show us the results. We've heard that, yes, you've made that announcement, you've announced that program there, you've announced millions there, you've announced that, you've announced that, you've announced that. In the past, we celebrated that and then went back. And then when we come back, we never asked, what happened to the 500 billion that you announced for? You never asked. So now, because now we realize that when the economy is not growing, we are all in trouble. It doesn't matter whether you earn a salary or you run a small business, or we are all all of us find ourselves not affording life and not being able to carry on. And that is why it is critical that South Africans are going to ask for results. And the results is what we need to produce. They are going to say, if we are still stagnant, if the economy is not growing, if we're still the same, actually, if we're still regressing, then what does that mean? What does that mean for us? Where does that put us? And that is why it is something that all of us need to be concerned about. All of us need to question. All of us need to be critical about. The informal sector is another value that we have left on the table for many years. And all of you will agree, when you go to informal sectors, there's a lot of activity going on there that is not recognized, that is not registered in any way or form. And that means that when we started with that process, it is not a process that's going to happen overnight, of course, but we need to speed it up. And one of the things that are really making us to have the courage is that now for the changes, for the repealing, for the amendments that we introduce now, it doesn't take now 2 years, 3 years, 5 years now to let a bill go to promulgate a law, because the president also understands the criticality of us moving on with speed. So his signature now, he doesn't hold it back now for a longer periods. When something is on the table, it's been researched, there's evidence, and it needs to become law, he is very quick moving with us, which is one help that is going to make sure that we actually get to where we are going. The small business, of course, they continue to face the challenges that they are facing. And really, indeed, the number one is access to finance. And this access to finance, as much as there is other state institutions like the IDC, like the NEF, like ZFARM, they are there to bridge the gap. But obviously, not all funding for small business come from government. There's a lot of people that are standing up on their own, and they are finding other ways. So the challenge of commercial banks requiring collateral, it comes up all the time. It comes up now and then. It comes up all the time, everywhere you go. They say, but they require me to have a property. They require me to have ABC. And that is why the law that's coming, which now is out for public comments, it says we have introduced other methods that can be used as collateral in rural areas. We are introducing things like using your stock as collateral. We know a lot of people are owning large stocks that they are making a living out of, but at the moment they can't use it as collateral when they are borrowing money. We are using psychological testing. We are using digital footprints. You can be assessed without having that property that is required, or other. If we don't introduce these other methods, people will continue to be closed outside, and we will continue to say, but we are blaming commercial banks because they don't want to borrow the money. We needed, and this is researched over years, to say, is it practical? Indeed, it is practical. And the tools that we are introducing in the National Entrepreneurship Strategy are the tools that are going to make sure that those that have been excluded are included. Once you have a bad credit record, it's almost like your life is over. No matter how much you are trying to build or rebuild, you continue to be excluded. And that is why we had to come up with ways of assessing this person, and not just say, because you defaulted at some point of your life, you are excluded for the rest of your life. And these are the practical things that we as government had to look at and say, but we need an alternative here. And these alternatives will become law, where most people will then be included in the access to finance. When we look at the access to markets, we've got many directorates that are dealing with access to markets. All departments have got a directorate that deals with that. Just last week, I was at an event called Embassies Fair and conference, where we've got all embassies there, where they are linked with small businesses directly, where embassies in South Africa are standing up and say, our country is open for business. Directly, we are here, and we are here to say, come do business in our country. These are embassies that are in South Africa. We have escalated the issue of access to markets, and we are having a lot of our small businesses now being able to do business outside South Africa. But everything that we do, we cannot do alone. It is something that as I said, every department has got that, because it is a priority for us that our small businesses remain financially stable, they keep on growing, and they don't remain small. On the other hand, they need to grow, and we need to make sure that they become large firms as well. The need for legislative reform did not just come. It has been coming for many years. You know, when we gather like this, people tell us actually what is on the ground. People tell us what they're experiencing. We are also not as something that we have established, particularly for myself, that those that know me, they meet me on the ground. They don't meet me in my office, because I'm on the ground with the small businesses that are struggling, because I want to hear their stories. I want to know why. And that is why when you make laws, you need to understand, where are these laws going? They need to come from the people that are experiencing what you are talking about, not you sitting there and saying, I think they're struggling in this area. They've got a voice on the table, and their voice is being heard. And that is why every time you see that there's a new law coming, particularly from small business development, you must know that that law is repealing 2 or 3 that were there. As I say, we've identified 28 pieces of legislation. So we don't introduce one on top of the other. When we say we are repealing this one, it's fine, we'll make those changes. If it's a new law completely, you must know that this is replacing the others. So don't say, oh, they're coming with more laws. It's because we needed to streamline it to make sure that, you know, it creates small businesses that are succeeding. When we are able to show results, South Africans also get the vuma, the courage to stand up. You know, when people are standing up and they're saying, I also want to be part of this, and I want to be calculated, and I want to be part of the solutions, because we need solutions. Everywhere we go, everywhere we gather, we must be solution focused. Our collaboration, as we are collaborating with the tourism industry, it's not just a collaboration that is just a collaboration. It must be a collaboration that yields results, because we are intertwined, we are linked. Our operating in silos did not yield results in the past. Actually, it created more problems, because there was a lot of duplication. There was a lot of the other doing it and the other repeating it. Now that we are linking everything together to say, even in our national entrepreneurship strategy that went out for public comments yesterday, we are highlighting the importance of the departments that we are working with, because to come to this strategy, several departments were involved, from local government to Home Affairs. As you know, we can't approach, if I'm walking around and I find that this person is actually here illegally, I don't have the means or the legal means to say, I'm going to deport you now. So it is important to work with other departments, to work with the police, to work with, so that we are able to root out the challenges from the core, and we don't keep on coming back to the same problems. The tourists that come to our country, to our provinces, to our towns, they create demand for accommodation, for food, for crafts, for cultural experiences. So if we are unable to make it easy for people to come to our country as well, we are making it harder for small businesses to grow. When people come to our country, they are creating opportunities for those small businesses. You know, we've had some unfortunate incidences. I live in Mpumalanga province, where we've got, we're also considered a tourist province. And sometimes we have unfortunate incidences where things happen to our tourists, be it crime, be it things that are unpleasant, which will then deter the people coming to that area at that time. These are the things that are affecting us. And that is why working together now, it is no longer an issue of choice. It is a must. There is a need for us to work together. Small businesses cannot grow if they are in a crime-ridden area, because they end up closing. Small businesses cannot grow if to get to that small businesses, there's no road. I will not be able, then that small business will die. So that is why everything that we are doing, if you look at the white paper for the local government that Minister Hlabisa published, it also intertwines all the areas that are involved. Because if we don't deal with it that way, we're going to keep on coming and saying, yeah, but you know, they tell us, oh, I'm affected by, here we're closing down because of crime. And then because I'm from small business development, I'm like, but crime is not in my area. Those days are over. It's what can be done? What can I do? We sit in the same cabinet. We sit in the same meetings. You can no longer just throw your hands in the air and say, because you're affected by crime, it's actually not in my area, and pass. That is unacceptable, because you are the one that must make sure that that small business succeed. You are the one that must speak to the Minister of Police. You are the one that must make sure to say, what can be done here? We've seen the Minister of Basic Education signing a memorandum of agreement with the Minister of Police because schools are affected by crime. What can be done? If we don't bring these things together, we're going to keep on pointing fingers at each other, and we're going to keep on throwing our hands in the air. And that is why it is no longer accepted. It is actually not acceptable for anyone to say, it is not my responsibility. Yes, it is not your responsibility, but in whose responsibility is it, and what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? You can't just leave it as a responsibility for someone. You must do something about it. And that is what we are committing to do, and that is what we are doing. We must strengthen local value chains, and we cannot strengthen them without farmers, transporters, artisans, and supply the tourism economy. Our areas need development in many areas. Actually, now we've just advertised for the business infrastructure program. You should see the applications, because infrastructure is one of the biggest things that anchor a business. If there is no infrastructure where they are operating, they will not be able to operate. Because of the digital divide, of course, many small businesses find themselves also being excluded, particularly in areas where there is no connectivity. And those continue to suffer, as that ministry is also working very hard to bring cheaper connectivity so that everyone can be able to access that. However, when we talk about the working together with all other areas, it means that we consider what is important in this area and what is needed and what action am I going to take. Always when you present something, it's like, what mischief are you trying to resolve? What is the problem and what is the solution? So you don't just put this problem on the table. What are you trying to resolve with this document, with this piece of legislation, with this bill, with this regulation, with this strategy, with this framework? What is it that you are trying to resolve? You start there. And what are the actions that must follow? As I say, South Africans they are not going to be kind. They're going to hold us accountable for the actions, not the words that we've been speaking, the actions that we've been taking, and particularly the results. The tourism attracts investments in roads, of course, and signage and safety. When a country loses its law and order, or the rule of law, doesn't only affect tourists, actually it affects even the citizens of that country. We ourselves start to be scared to go to our neighboring provinces, to go to our neighboring towns, because tourism is not only about tourists, of course, that come to our country. It's us moving and circulating the money, the capital inside where we are. And if we lose that, if we lose a handle on law and order, again, I'm going to say this, we as a country, we as people are then in trouble, because we ourselves are no longer visiting our neighboring towns, our neighboring provinces, our neighboring tourist destinations, because we then tend to cage ourselves in places where we feel safe, which then stops the capital from flowing. And that affects then small businesses, and it affects particularly the township and rural developments in actually growing. So that is something that we must fight very hard for, that we don't leave it to get to a point where we are too scared to travel in our own country. Our strategies aims to promote participation of a lot of people that were excluded, that continue to be excluded in participating in the economy. You know, when you see graduates with placards at the robot, it may be that you're seeing one or two, But when you look deeper and realize how many graduates have graduated and they're at home, it's something that must worry all of us. When we look and see young people that are healthy and should be productive and they are not, it's something that should worry all of us. And it's something that should keep us awake at night. And that is why all our strategies are focused on really a laser focus on the youth, the women, the people with disabilities, because there is a need. There's a need to upscale that. And while we are doing all the other things, because sometimes people say, does that mean that, as a male South African, I'm excluded? No, there are many other programs that are focused on you. So the upscaling of the other sectors, it's not at the expense of the other sector. Because another thing that we need to be conscious of and need to be aware of is that, the upliftment of the other shouldn't come at the expense of the other, because then we will be working backwards. So if there are programs and activities that are channeled there, know that there are activities that are channeled to the other side as well, so that we uplift everyone and we come to a point where the ecosystem can sustain itself. When we put a laser focus on regulatory environment, that we are now regulating or deregulating most of the things, believe me, we are going to get somewhere as a country. We're going to get somewhere as people, because these regulations were created and no one ever looked whether they are still relevant, whether they are still working. And most of them, if you look as we have started now, the National Business Amendment Act was actually repealing the National Business Act of 1991. So which means that from 1991, we never looked whether we are still on track in powering the small business ecosystem. And the fact that now we are now looking at those things, I really believe those are the things that are going to take us forward. We need to make sure that we facilitate access to finance, of course, access to markets, as I said, through the tools that we have introduced to make sure that we facilitate this, are going to make sure that a lot of people that have been excluded will now be included. Gatherings like this put us in a position to say, what is it that needs to be done? And we need to go and do it. And again, I want to thank the Tourism Business Council of South Africa for this gathering and for this event, because this allows us to really put solutions on the table and say, let's go out and let's make sure that we get it done to not only help our country, but also to help ourselves. If our economy is going to start to move forward, we will all move forward. If we are thriving where we are in our communities, rural, urban, it means that our communities will thrive. That will make sure that then it translates into our country thriving and actually moving forward. And I really believe that together we can do that. Thank you very much.